name is Russ Sorrells, and we are CapEx Sales. We're located in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. We are blessed to have the opportunity to represent Cincinnati Test Systems here in the Carolinas and Virginia. What we do with this IndustryCast, our mission is to always be adding value. We want to add value for our customers. We want to help grow them in their career, and however possible, and help them understand from a manufacturing perspective what's going on in the industry. And specifically, we focus on, of course, the technologies that we work with, whether it be leak testing, functional testing, automation. So that's where our focus is primarily in the capital equipment world. So today, so fortunate to have Chuck Hagyard with us. Chuck and I go way back. He might mention that in a bit, but Chuck is an expert. He is a pro. When he digs into something, he gets to the heart of the matter and understands everything that's going on. So
I don't know, man. You're setting me up for failure here, brother.
Well,
the bar's too high, man. Your bar's too high.
They said, Chuck, you are going to be our electric vehicle expert. And of course, Chuck dug in and has gone after it. And what you see here is just the tip of the spear as far as the knowledge that he has about this EV world, where it's going, where the focus is. And so we're going to talk about kind of the expansion and what the future holds for electric vehicles from, of course, this is from our perspective and from Chuck's perspective. And then we're going to talk about specifically some of the testing and special testing that's out there and some strategies for testing these electric vehicle components. So with that, here is Chuck Hagyard, my good friend and colleague. So.
Right on. Thanks, Ross. I see we got a 937 number in there. So we've got somebody from the great state of Ohio just to my south here. So I won't make any dumb comments about being a University of Michigan fan and get beat up unnecessarily. So anyways, we're going to transition here. We're going to get this show on the road and get going here. All right. So what we'll do is I'll tell you a little bit about who I am, just very briefly. We'll talk about the evolution of the industry, right? And what's happening with the market. And again, this is a very high level overview. We've got roughly 30 minutes to work with. So I'm going to hit high level points here, and clearly can't cover all of what we're going to want to try to know in this 30-minute period. But my goal is to at least give you one thing that you can walk away with that's some value out of this content. So from the evolution, we'll transition into talking about the historical perspective and talk about future projections of what the market looks like. We'll talk about the factors that influence EV adoption. We'll share some examples of investments that are being made, significant EV investments that companies are putting their money where their mouth is, right? They're putting their money out there and they're really driving some significant investment. Unfortunately, I'm a Detroit boy, and we're seeing a lot of that investment happening here right in the Motor City. Right. So from a product highlight standpoint, I'll hit a few products that are being introduced into the market. We'll talk about some testing challenges, right? And some things specifically with the EV market that are really, really difficult challenges that we have to consider and overcome, right? And those considerations are the things that we have to factor into the equation when we're developing the processes and looking at what is the best test method to really go forward with, right? And folks that are in the test world, you know what I'm talking about. There are things that we have to absolutely understand about the product and have the right specifications in place so that we don't have a real nightmare when we go to implement equipment on a shop floor. And then lastly, I'll share with you a little bit of what our strategic recap looks like within our organization and how we see some of the things that we need to do. So me, I'm a 1992 graduate of Central Michigan University, right? I'm a proud Chippewa. Right up, fire up chips, right? So I started my career back in 1993. I started as a field rep in the state of Michigan in 1993. And I had a long time relationship with these guys, right? Russ in particular was my roommate back in 1998. We lived together, and I tell a funny story. I wanted him to stay with us, but my wife said, nah, we got married and it's time that your buddy leaves. But I wanted Russ to stay. The other guy, Chris Mullins, that I'm very close with, is a guy that I met through other relationships, business-wise, and brought him together with Russ. And if you're dealing with the CapEx team, you're dealing with some of the best capital equipment guys that are out there. You've got the blessing of working with those guys. It's outstanding to work with them. My positions, I've held numerous positions at CTS and TASI, from field rep positions to leadership positions on the sales side. And now I'm working on a position that I probably enjoy the most, where I focus on market development in the business development segment. And I'm fortunate enough also to work with other TASI companies. You know, there are companies like Symmetric Instruments that I work with, or our Innomatic division over in Europe. So I'm fortunate enough to have that experience to do that. But here, full disclosure, I am an internal combustion engine lover all the way. This market's evolving, but my heart is 1970s high compression Chevy small block motors, man. That's what makes me tick. But I know that the market's evolving, and I have to as well, because I can tell you with that car you saw on the previous slide, you pull up through a stoplight and you look next to you and you see a P90D and you pucker, because you know that P90D is going to blow your doors off with a 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. I just take solace in the fact that I got a little bit better sound, although they can make sound with these EV vehicles now. But it's just the market's evolving, and we have to evolve with it, right? And that's a mindset change for me.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's time to take it seriously, right?
Couple bad liners. You know, I get pretty charged up when I think about this job, or it's electrifying to think about the future of what's happening in the EV world. All right, so the evolution of the industry. Again, I'm a Detroit guy, right? And we call ourselves a Motor City here in Detroit. And you look at the 2009 to 2018 time period, and it was absolutely unprecedented in the amount of internal combustion engine development and investment that was there. In my 28 years in the industry, I've never seen a time where there was so much investment in ICE, and I never dreamed that you'd see the horsepower to displacement ratios and all that things that come together to show you just how far ICE technology has become. But the future is electric, and Detroit now has to become the electric Motor City, right? I mean, the mindset for me, I was born in 1969, grew up in Detroit. It's always been Motor City, but we are becoming, along with other places, you know, the Sparks Nevadas and the Fremont Californias and other companies out there, but we're now becoming like the electric Motor City. So we look also at the realignment of engineering resources that have happened within our customers. And you see how people's roles have changed and how that aligns with the electrification strategies. You look at the COVID pandemic and you say, wow, what things really didn't change in terms of spending in 2020? And it was EV activity. My day now is filled, the majority of my day now is filled with EV activity. And that's where the companies are putting the money where their mouth is. And the pace of development, Russ, you can probably testify to this as well, but the pace of development on the product side is faster than I've ever seen before. Companies are absolutely racing to get to market. Beat others to it, right? And the new players that are entering the market, whether it's Lucid, whether it's Rivian, whether it's Nikola, whoever, there's just a few examples, but they're racing to get to market. And the traditional big guys here in Detroit, they're really, really struggling to flex and be in a position where they can compete up with the nimble nature of these newcomers to the market and be able to bring value and new product to market. This slide is interesting.
The barrier to entry, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that was interesting about this slide, and forgive me, I highlight stuff for making it easy for me, but the key thing is in 2010, we had 17,000 total electric vehicles in the world on the road, right? That number jumped in 2019 to over 7.2 million vehicles, wow. EV vehicles. That's pretty substantial. The other thing that really helps us to understand strategically where we need to be focusing time and energy in the short term is look at that growth and understand that 47% of that growth took place in China. Then you look at the European market and you look at what's happening here in North America, where at the time that this was captured in 2019, there were approximately 1.5 million vehicles on the road in the United States, representing about 20% of the overall market. So it's amazing what's happening historically. We look at the overview by market and we say, wow, interesting. From 2019 to 2022 timeframe, you're looking at over 523 new EV models being introduced to the market.
Wow.
Holy moly, man.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's difficult to wrap your mind. How many, I mean, this is, you may or may not know the answer to this, Chuck, but how many vehicle models are there today, like that are
Oh
ICE?
man, you look at that. Well, you can kind of look on the continuum here. 2020, probably a little over a couple hundred, maybe total worldwide. But you look at the growth, and look at the growth by segment too, and you look at A, B, and C, and D and E segments and other segments, and it helps you to understand the distribution of how the growth is going to happen over time. But this slide jumped out to me. It's like, man, GM alone is saying 20 to 25 models that they're going to launch by 2023. But man, you look at it, to get to 523 globally, there's a lot of other companies that need to be bringing product to market.
That is crazy.
This one was startling to me, right? Because I went through that whole mindset of trying to talk my boss into the fact that over time, we're going to see business dropping because of the ICE market tailing down, and there wasn't as much content on the EV side. But I don't believe that. I think it's new. There's different opportunities in terms of what we need to pursue content-wise, but the overall growth is still pretty impressive. I mean, it's interesting to see how this market is evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this slide, this underscores just how much risk the big guys that are out there and some of the new entrants are taking in terms of the investments that they're making. You look at on the vertical axis, you look at the different resources that are out there that do market research, and you see at the diversity of what they're looking at in projections between 2016 out to 2030 at this time. And you can just get an understanding of just how much diversity is out there and how in thought, right, of what this market's going to look like and how it's going to grow. And it just, again, underscores the risk that companies are taking. This is an interesting slide in the sense that we look at it from a regional perspective, from both a short-term and a long-term view, right? Clearly, you can see the slope of the curve on the short-term side is really about China, right? So from our strategy standpoint, we have to execute well in China. We have to have a very focused sales organization, business development effort there, because the adoption rate, the curve is steeper there. We have to capitalize on that. And as we look longer term, the other markets grow. You see Europe increasing as well. You see North America starting to increase and is starting to get much larger. But in the short term, it really underscores the standpoint that you need to be executing very well in China. We need to have a very focused effort there. Now, we also look at what are the factors that are influencing EV adoption, right? What's holding the product back potentially, and what are the things that need to be addressed? First of all, it's model availability, right? As we get more models and there's more selections to choose from. And by the way, some of these new vehicles are outstanding looking vehicles. And you look at the selections that are there with the aesthetics of these vehicles, it's fantastic. I mean, I just get excited when I look at the styling of these vehicles. So model availability is important. So we get our business hats on and we look at what other things do we look at, and it's cost competitiveness. EV is gonna grow as it becomes more on par with the cost of the ICE propulsion systems, right? And also you'll see things like 500-mile ranges now on a single charge with companies that are out there. So range anxiety was something that was holding the market back.
That's what you always hear. You're exactly. I mean, that's
well, you had one. You can speak to it.
Yeah, well, that's right. I did. I had a Model S 85 plus, and anytime I would go anywhere, it was mainly we had to stop and hit a supercharger, which was fun when you're on vacation, but it's a challenge when you're trying to get someplace for an appointment. And so I was always anxious about that myself. But but that's the conversations that I've had over the last couple of days. That's what everyone has talked about. Wow, you can have it to drive around town, but it's not real practical. but a 500-mile range, that's practical for anybody.
Sure. And infrastructure and charging speed, those are things that we have to consider. Nobody wants to sit there for an extended period of time and have their battery charged. And they want to be able to know, like for me, if I'm going to drive to Ohio or some other areas, I want to know ahead of time where I've got the charging infrastructure to be able to charge my vehicle. Because the last thing I want to do is have a dead battery when I'm on I-75. So
that's right. Yeah, you have to plan. So that was the realization that I had after, when I had my Tesla, was I had to plan.
Yeah, for sure. We look at gas prices too, and a couple of years ago when we were looking at $4 to $4.50 gas prices here in Detroit, the electric vehicle looked that much more attractive. Now with gas prices being historically low, that's a negative influencer for EV adoption. But still, I think this market is gaining traction more and more every day, and these factors become less and less. And lastly, the battery supply and demand, that the supply for batteries is starting to outpace the demand that's out there to produce them. And you see things like what GM's doing with LG, where they're putting a $2.2 billion investment into Lordstown, Ohio, to build a new battery cell plant, right? Because they're dealing with that supply and demand issue. This is an example of investments, and this fires me up because I drive by this facility all the time, and I see the DHAM plant being converted, and I see the jobs it is creating. My brother's in the industrial contracting business, and his company's doing lots of work at DHAM. And we're seeing how GM's $2.2 billion investment in the city is putting people to work, right? And these companies like GM are putting their money where their mouth is, making huge investments. I mentioned the new lithium-ion battery plant down in Lordstown that's going to build the batteries for the Ultium batteries for the new future generation GM vehicles.
How many batteries did they talk about, the number of batteries that they would expect that plant to produce?
Yeah, they did, Russ, but off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what the stated capacity was. But yeah, there was something that was spelled out that I read. I just can't remember off the top of my head. All right, and we look at what launches are out there, and folks that are working in the industry and they're talking to companies like General Motors, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, because you're living BEV3, which is it's a generation of pass car vehicles and small SUVs that you'll see, and you'll see the Cadillac Lyriq as really the first vehicle that they launch off the BEV3 platform. But again, this growth in model proliferation will be really because they're going to have common platforms that they can build upon and scale battery technology accordingly. And the other one, that if you're a Detroit person dealing with General Motors, you'll know the BET, the BT1, whatever they call it. It's ET1B. I've heard there's a lot of different monikers for this program, but this is essentially their truck program or truck platforms that they're launching. And you're going to see the reemergence of the Hummer branding again, right? Which just kind of emphasizes muscle flexing in my mind. It's just a cool vehicle, and you'll see that happening, and that'll be happening first. And man, I can tell you that this particular platform, along with BEV3, that is what's really consuming a big chunk of my time right now. It's huge. Then we look at Ford. You look at the money that they're investing in the Dearborn truck plant. A $1.45 billion investment in Dearborn truck, to build the electrified F-150. And if you get some time, Google the electrified 150 vehicle pulling the trains. It's amazing, and it just underscores the torque that these vehicles can generate. I can't wait to ride in one. It's got to be just an absolutely exhilarating experience to ride in this vehicle when it gets done. It's going to be awesome. All right, so here's probably what test guys and leak test people want to understand, and what are the challenges that we face. And man, they're numerous. I got to tell you that I think that batteries and some of these EV components are some of the most difficult applications I've ever worked on, right? I mean, to get range, they have to be light and they need to be flexible. So those things, they're always good things to have in terms of material selection and range, but when you get into the test world, man, they make you stay awake at night.
Oh, yeah.
I tell you, it's insane. I mean, just think about how just a slight barometric pressure change on the surface of a large surface area, thin-walled part can affect the volume. We studied it. We put accelerometers on the surface of a part, and we measured the deflection that we saw with barometric pressure changes, and even a half a PSI vacuum being pulled on the inside of a battery, how much deflection that resulted in, and what that meant in terms of the volume change that we saw as a result of that deflection. Huge, huge,
Yeah.
huge, huge. And our Symetric brothers, they did some fantastic work to come up with a proprietary barometric correction algorithm that has put us in positions to be able to test batteries that we never would have been able to be in a position to do. So Symetric and CTS,
and that's real time, right?
it's real time, man. It's real time that we did development work on, and it was a joint effort between our Symetric brothers and our CTS brothers. They figured it out.
That is amazing. So
Yeah, unbelievable.
What I want to make sure that we're on the same page with, the reason right now we're talking about specifically, I think, pressure decay, mass flow, differential pressure decay technologies. Those are the technologies that we're talking about, because we're, at a 10 SCCM, 10 standard cubic centimeters per minute leak rate. Those are the technologies that you typically would apply. So what we're doing is we're measuring any pressure change in the part, essentially. So when Chuck talks about a barometric pressure change, how that affects the pressure inside the part, that is going to affect the reading that the instrumentation has. So that's why it's so important that all the environment is stable, or we've got some method, some algorithm for correcting an external pressure change that's going to affect the internal pressure of the part, because that's really all we care about, is the pressure inside the part. But anything that affects that pressure inside the part has got to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, look at that formula. That formula for me was life-changing back in 1993, right? Understanding that formula helped me to understand how this stuff works, right? The PV equals NRT formula. And once I started to get my head around that, all this leak testing stuff made sense, because coming out of school, man, it was just like, this is like crazy. I don't understand this technology. And we had really smart people at CTS, and still do, I mean, at that time, and still do, that were smart enough to be able to take it to a layman's level and help me to understand it. But when I understood PV equals NRT, it all started to come together, and I could start to understand the influences, right? But with batteries, look at what we're trying to do. Russ mentioned these low leak rates. These are legitimate specs that I can tell you that customers have, where we're testing batteries that have a volume of around 150 liters of free space inside the battery. They're testing at 10 cc's a minute, and they want to do it in under 300 seconds. And, oh, by the way, they don't want to invest in trace gas. They want to do it with an air-based technology. It's like, man, how are we going to get there? And that's where our partners, they collaborated together and came up with a really novel way of doing that kind of testing. And I tell you, without it, there's no way, man. It was game over. And there's some really smart engineers that I just take my hat off to on both sides with our Symetric and CTS team that got down and dirty and figured out how to make this work. And I tell you, they convinced, Russ, the most important thing is they convinced our customers that it was legitimate too. It wasn't hocus pocus black magic stuff. They showed them the formulas, they walked them through the algorithms, and they showed them how they were doing it, and the customer bought into it. That to me was really good work.
That's awesome.
Now, so testing considerations, right? We have to look at the considerations and things that we have to be cognizant of when we're going to start looking at testing EV components. And first of all, design for manufacturability and testability. I just coined a new word, right? Everybody talks about manufacturability. I love it,
but you're exactly right, because they'll design it to manufacture, but how are we going to check to make sure?
Sometimes, yeah, exactly. I can tell you some of the batteries that I'm testing right now with the seal designs that they have for production sealing, because of the contours of the part, are so difficult to seal without butyl or a rope seal or something that allows to compensate for the nominal gaps between the trays and the covers. I mean, it's crazy. And I got a text at 8 o'clock last night that one of our real principal engineers down at CTS got a seal design that worked. So we have to also look at the test specifications, and we should be looking at the specifications first. We have to understand the product, and we need to develop the specifications and then the process around the product instead of the other way of doing things, which we see a lot, where they get the product out there. They don't even think about testability. They don't even think about what test method would really be the best based on what they're trying to do. And we get into situations where, man, you just got a black hole that you spend time and energy trying to get your way out of, and sometimes you never get out of it, right? So we want to understand the relative pros and cons of the different test methods, right? If we can educate, and that's an educational process that we have to go through with our customers to help them understand what the trade-offs are.
That's right.
Right? Absolutely, we have to do that. And we
Last
have
week,
to look at designing the manufacturing process with testability in mind as well, right? It's not just the product design, it's designing the manufacturing process to test the part and understanding what trade-offs you're going to have if you want to use one technology over the other. Example, real world example, right? We've got cases where we've got battery pack customers that are trying to use a pressure-based test measurement system, and they're trying to do it where the upstream process of the leak test is a function test on the battery, where they're putting like huge amount of amperage through this battery, and they heat that thing up, and it's hot when it comes into the leak test station, and they don't understand why the results are varying, right? So they did that. They designed their process in a way where they had a functional test prior to a leak test, and that caused so much heartburn. In subsequent programs, through an educational process, they've redesigned their process so that they're doing the leak test before they're actually doing the function test. It might be in the same station, but they're not doing the test in a case where the function test is done first prior to the leak test. The other thing we have to look at is being really honest with our customers about what is the best test method. You know, they look at the leak rate and the test pressure. We have to consider what the material construction looks like. We have to consider the environmental considerations as well, right? Without that, it's an incomplete analysis of what you're doing to select the proper test method, right? And that can lead us in different directions, right? If we know we're going to have a function test done in advance of a air-based leak test, we have to be more in an education mode, helping our customers understand that if you're going to do that, you might want to look at a tracer gas technology that's going to be immune to the effects of temperature, right? But unless you get into that level of detail with your customer up front, and you're looking at your process flow diagram with them, you're not going to be able to help them steer the way out of potential minefields unless you have that kind of collaborative rapport with them.
Yeah, we were working with a company the other day, and in that company we were working with, they're going to make a motor, and it's cooled, and their customer was dictating the leak rate, and it was unobtainable as it relates to, because like you talked about that second point in developing the test specifications, when you're not certain, as a designer, when you're new and you're designing these products, you want it to be as tight as possible. But if it's unachievable, it's not measurable, it's not repeatable, then it doesn't matter what your specification is, because the cost to test will be prohibitive, right? So having the right spec, in this case, I think it was like a 0.7 or so reject criteria. In reality, you know, you and I both know that could be 3 SECM or in that neighborhood, and it wouldn't prevent the coolant from leaking out. So
yeah, I mean, I was quoted here on the right as saying, look, one of the things we have to do is our product and manufacturing engineers have to work side by side to design products and systems that can be reliably tested in a production environment. That loop doesn't always exist, right? It gets circumvented, and we get situations where it becomes a perpetual science project because of the fact that we didn't work together up front, and we didn't really deeply dive into what the process looked like and help them to make the best decision on what the the right technology needed to be.
That's exactly right. That is the most important. How can we work together to develop a process and specification?
I just realized I have the same quote twice, Russell.
I
I
know,
had
I
two
saw
quotes
that.
and I put the
Yeah,
same
that's
quote in there twice.
double
Yeah.
down on that quote.
Well, hey, full disclosure here, old Chucky boy did this presentation or this slide at about 4:30 this morning. So Russell, you can attest to the fact I like to get out of bed early, but my eyes were still kind of half closed this morning when I did this. So
back when Chuck and I lived together, I had a pager, and I would set the alarm on the pager to try to get up before Chuck. So I was
I don't know, Russell.
out of bed and working before he got up.
I think you got me beat now, brother. I think you got me beat. All right, so here's just from our perspective as an organization, the things that we see that we need to consider and factor into our strategy. And they're probably things that other companies would consider as well. And first of all, I mean, we have to look at the adoption rate forecast and understand that they differ widely, right? And we have to do the best that we can do to familiarize ourselves with the market and get comfortable with what we see as the future and scale our investments accordingly, right? Because there's nobody out there that truly knows what's going to happen, right? There's a lot of companies that are betting the house on it, but we don't know. It's still a little bit of a gray area,
Absolutely.
right? We do know that in 2020, that's where the money's getting spent, right? COVID pandemic hit us, but man, companies still bet the house on EV. And again, the big projects that I'm working on right now are EV focused projects, and they're happening fast. From our perspective, again, the strategy execution is key. America and North America is a very important part, but to take advantage of the growth and the slope of the growth curve in Europe and Asia, we have to be a really synergistic organization and capitalize in the short term in the areas where money's being spent at the fastest rate, right? And then finally, in North America, for us, we need to expand our customer base, right? I mean, we're heavy with those three companies that you see here, but we also know that we have to capitalize and build our business with the other emerging companies that are out there. And the question that we ask ourselves is, who's going to be the next Tesla? Or will there be the next Tesla, right? So we're gearing ourselves around trying to understand those questions and developing our strategies around that.
Sure.
So Russell, I'm at 34 minutes right now. So with that, I think I'm good with
Wonderful.
the content.
Nice.
And I'd like you to make this available to the participants that we're on. If they email you and tell you that they'd like to see this, feel free. You can PDF
wonderful.
it, you can send it to them.
You know, while we're on here, Chuck, you've got this upon it. These are EV launch plans by region. Just toggle through these launch plans to give people some perspective.
Yeah, just look at here. You'll see North America, and you'll get an idea. Again, this was taken. The source of this was a source called Marklines. They're a paid subscription source that we subscribe to, and this was one of the features that they had within Marklines that we could use to try to understand at the vehicle level what was being developed and when were the timeframes that those products were anticipated to come to market, right? You look at the EU launches, right? Again, you can see that it jives with what is being projected. There's more EV and advanced propulsion activity there than there is here. And then we look at Asia, and you see, my goodness, man, there's a tremendous amount of activity in Asia that we have to capitalize on. And
wow.
Again, it's just that there's a world of opportunity out there, and we just have to understand how we can promote ourselves so that we can go and attack it, right? And part of it is conveying to the greater world that's out there that we do have some experience there, we do have some expertise, and we need to plan our marketing efforts around that so that companies will see where we've been and where we want to go, and the products and scope of solutions that we can offer is there.
Well, I think
with that being said,
as we share this information with our customers who are engineers, obviously we do a tremendous amount of work in the automotive world. That's that's looking at that. I think what's so encouraging is seeing all those platforms and looking now. ICE is obviously not going away tomorrow, but the opportunity and the growth is there. It's going to continue to grow and expand, and so there are going to be opportunities, especially for those that focus in that area, that really try to understand the manufacturing processes for batteries or for electric motors, and some of the drive components that are particularly important in those systems. To specialize in that area is a bright future for anyone that takes the time to really do that and become a subject matter expert, just like you, Chuck Hagyard. You're a subject matter expert, and we're grateful that you would take the time on a Wednesday to be here with us. This is what we do every Wednesday. If you're interested in learning more about manufacturing processes, industry changes, trends, things that are going on, join us here at IndustryCast. We welcome that. We welcome feedback. We welcome guidance on where maybe we should be, where we should be talking about. So if there's something that you want to know more about, let us know. We'll do the research and we'll come on here and we'll talk about it. So Chuck, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today to hop on and educate us on all things EV.
Very good. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for folks that joined in. Have a great day, guys.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, bud.
All right,
Have a
brother.
great day.
We'll see you.
Stay in touch.
Take care. Yep.